Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm thrilled to welcome Marcus Gorman back to the podcast today to talk about Play It Again, Sam, released 50 years ago. How are we doing, Marcus?
I'm doing fabulous. I'm in the middle of programming films for the Seattle International Film Festival, and I just started the publications half of my duties, which means writing about all of them and making sure all the programmers write well, because I'm their editor, and they should give me their work. Some people are not writers, but they are when they go through me, and they should trust me, and they have, and I'm very, very happy for that.
Oh, that's awesome. When is that festival?
April 14th through 24th. It'll be both in person and online.
Oh, perfect. So we're recording this in February, but it'll be dropping in early April. So that'll be just right before your festival starts.
Perfect. Yeah. Approximately 150 feature films, and I don't know how many short films just yet.
Wow. 150 feature films?
Mm-hmm. Well, we used to be a 25-day festival until the pandemic. And when I started working there, it was 290 feature films.
Wow.
Yeah.
Why stop there? Why not just have the festival go the whole year?
Well, we do run 5 cinemas year round. So that's cool. The rest of the year.
That's fantastic. I bet there's so many great films you watch for that most of the general public don't get to see.
Yeah, and also a lot of very, very bad films a lot of the general public don't get to see during the programming phase, which is just fine. It takes all kinds. I get it.
That's part of it.
Making a movie is the hardest freaking thing in the world. I mean, God bless anybody who can manage to crank out a 90-minute film and get it in front of people's eyes.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. That goes for films of today. That goes from films from 50 years ago. Thanks for being back on the podcast. Might be the first instance where we recorded an episode a few weeks ago that hasn't actually dropped yet. We're recording a second episode of the year and the first one hasn't come out. It will have come out, of course, by now. But we also talked about Pink Flamingos that will have dropped in March. So check that out. That was a fun conversation too. Today we're talking Play It Again, Sam, starring Woody Allen, Diane Keaton, directed by Herbert Ross. Really talented filmmaker. Looked up Herbert Ross's filmography yesterday, and just some really fantastic titles. Worked from the 60s to the 90s, and we're going to talk about his career more in general at the end. As we get started here, kind of, what role has this movie played in your life? When did you first see it? How did Play It Again, Sam come to you?
I think I saw this for the first time about 10 years ago. I grew up with Woody Allen films, and I know that today that is a controversial statement. Well, it's controversial to talk about him, and that's something we can get to later. Yeah. This is not one he directed, so it was never really on my radar, because it comes after What's Up, Tiger Lily, Take the Money and Run, and Bananas, and this is based off of his 1969 play, and because he only wrote the film and starred in it and not directed it, it was not a high priority for me.
And I would say was this the most famous film that he acted in and did not direct? Is there another film that's more famous?
There's The Front with Zero Mostel. That's about it. He's acted in a few things, but he wants people to hire him to act. He's always said that, but people never did. And also, he's a workhorse is the thing. Right. He's been working nonstop since he was a teenager, when he would send in jokes to a New York newspaper, and he using the exact same typewriter he still uses today.
Right. Yeah, there's The Front, which I believe is 76, but mostly he directs the films that he's appeared in. So, and this was the same year as Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex. So he had 2 films this year, one of which he wrote and directed, and this one he just starred in and wrote, as you said, based on his 1969 play. This would have come after you. So I think he directed 2 movies before this, right? Take the Money and Run from 69 and Bananas from 71.
And technically he directed What's Up, Tiger Lily, but that and that is, using pre-existing footage, and they dub, and it's an Asian action spy caper, and comedians dub over. It's actually one of the first ones of Woody Allen's I've seen, because my mom loves it. My mom adores Woody Allen, and then around the 90s stopped watching.
She stopped watching. Yeah,
rightfully. It's a very funny movie, obviously very dated, but for a movie where white people are are narrating and overdubbing Asian actors, it is surprisingly not racist.
Okay.
It's not Kung Pao Enter the Fist, the Steve Odenkirk movie. It's really just more silly than anything else. Like a lot of his, as they say in oh God, what's the movie where Stardust Memories? We like your earlier, funnier ones. All these are his earlier, funnier ones. And then after Annie Hall, he makes Interiors, and that's when he gets really serious.
Yeah. Like when I first discovered his films, I watched the comedies. I remember watching Interiors and just being blown away as a 14, 15-year-old being like, this is the same guy directing this? Like his career had so many interesting levels in terms of going back and forth between comedy and drama. It's just kind of like whatever he felt like doing that year. I'm going to make a drama this year. And
he makes a movie a year. At least one movie a year. He's never stopped. He did stand up. He built this whole persona. He tours. He at least used to tour with his jazz band because he plays clarinet. He's just nonstop working. And I remember there's a PBS documentary about him that came out like 10 years ago. And there's a whole section of people saying he compartmentalizes. So his personal life and his professional life, he does not think of them in the same way. Because in real life, he's just kind of a straightforward dude. He's actually kind of a jock. This nebbishy personality is a character he created through his stand-up comedy, and that brought him all this fame. He thought, why not? And that's what comedians do. They create personalities. He was writing For Your Show of Shows with Neil Simon and Carl Reiner, and that's where he kind of built this mentality as a filmmaker and as an on-screen personality, which he no longer does because he's in his 80s now.
Yeah, how old is he now? Like mid 80s, 85-ish, somewhere around there?
I didn't look, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, because I mean, his first film was over 50 years ago that it came out. I can't imagine he's younger than 82 or 83.
Right, he's like 37, 38 in this movie. So he's
okay.
So he's in his mid to late 80s.
Yeah, and he's a figure that I've kind of gone back and forth on. Like I didn't do an episode on Bananas, mostly because that's the one early comedy he directed. I'm not a huge fan of Bananas. I know a lot of people like it, but like when I think of his 70s films, like the comedies, I immediately think of Love and Death and Sleeper. Like those are the two I think of. And like I think part of it is because I'm such a huge Diane Keaton fan, and Bananas does not have Diane Keaton yet. Like she would come this year and play against Sam, and then she would be in everything he directed from Sleeper to Manhattan, right? I think she's in every one.
Yeah, I think so. And then she shows up a little later, like in Manhattan Murder Mystery in the early 90s.
Right.
But yeah, he goes from her to, because like her and Louis Lasser around the same time, and then after that is Mia Farrow. After that is Scarlett Johansson. There's a 10-year gap in the middle.
His muses, right?
Yeah, and he talks about his muses literally in this story, in this movie, and he describes them almost to a T.
Right.
His type.
He's a difficult figure to reckon with. It's tricky with this because we're looking at film history from 50 years ago. It does not seem appropriate to me to just not talk about any of his work, especially since he has at least 3 or 4 really big important titles in the 70s. I mean, I don't know how long I'm going to be doing this for, but like Annie Hall, for example, it's not a movie that I would just ignore. And he's one of many figures that, even going back 50 years, it gets into the weeds a little bit. It's a little tricky, but my focus is on the art and the films, and that's what I'm going to try to talk about.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing here. And that's the thing, and that's what we had to contend with history. That's what Turner Classic Movies is very good about, especially the last couple of years. They have contextualized their movies. Like I watched Gone with the Wind again last year, and they had a long intro about, no, this was controversial at the time, but the history consumed that stuff, like the NAACP was protesting the movie in the 1930s. It is not a new thing that Gone with the Wind is controversial. We just forgot about it and silenced those voices. Now with Woody Allen, the thing is you have to stick with the middle ground, because there are people online, I see this on Twitter constantly, and if you say one bad thing about him, they will jump on you and litter your replies with everything. So here's the thing. He is an extremely influential filmmaker, one of the biggest names, one of the most prolific Jewish American filmmakers. As a person with a Jewish father who contends with a lot of stuff, I look towards Woody Allen's films to fill in a lot of gaps, because my grandparents were Brooklyn based, and so was Woody Allen, and around the same time. And And now we get to the 90s and controversy happens.
Mhm.
He marries his girlfriend's adopted daughter, which
Right.
is a really weird thing.
Mhm.
There's that is strange. It was not illegal. Some people say, oh, but that's their excuse. It's really weird. And with the recent accusations that have come up.
Mhm.
So the thing is, there are things we could never know.
Right.
We only know them through the media, but there was an HBO documentary last year
Yeah.
on the situation. And
Which I watched.
at bare minimum, they have a sequence of him leaving voice messages for Mia. And he controls the media at this point. He controls the story and says some things that I find very hurtful and makes him seem like not such a great person.
Right.
I think that is fair to say. We cannot know the things that happened. If you believe one side or the other, I get it. I'm on the side of believing that he may have done some very bad things. We cannot prove it. And he is no longer really making movies or money in America.
Right.
He's close to death. Not that that's an excuse, but he will be okay. He has always, like I said, compartmentalized these things. As somebody who loves like theatrical type films, as somebody who is a playwright, his stuff is deeply influential for me. Nonstop. Oh, yeah. He's extremely inventive. He finds this great middle ground of intellectualism and like a mix of highbrow and lowbrow, because a lot of the stuff he's referencing, like the highbrow philosophy stuff and all these art films, that's him punching out of his weight class, and he knows it. That's the joke. He is a normal guy trying to seem smart using these references, and he is very meta about that his characters actually don't know crap. That's the joke, that he's pretending to be this person. I know it doesn't always read that way to people, but that's fine. And also, unfortunately, one of his films is in like my top 20.
Okay, which film is that?
Everyone Says I Love You.
Oh,
you know I love musicals.
Love that movie too.
It's wonderful. I was 13 when that came out. It came out the same month as Evita, and I would see them back to back for like 3 months. They are just both so incredible. And that actually, I didn't grow up with old movies, and that is such a wealth of information about old musicals that I then found and watched. So
and it's the only musical he made, right, from beginning to end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is so weird because he was so good at it too. I mean, it's not shot incredibly well, but it's shot in that very specific Woody Allen style, and it's just very sweet. It's wonderfully cast. It has up and comers like Gabby Hoffman, Natalie Portman, and Natasha Lyonne, who narrates the movie.
Yeah, the cast. I mean, the ensemble cast in his films in the 90s are just amazing. I mean, even a lesser film like Celebrity, you just look at the list of people that are in that movie. God. And Everyone Says I Love You was one of those. I remember seeing that with my mom. I was 12 when that came out, and first I was just into it, and then I'm just like, all these great actors that I really have enjoyed the last couple of years, and Goldie Hawn and Julia Roberts and all these people, and the fact that it was a musical, it was like the first film I saw of his in a theater, and it really made an impression on me. That's one of my favorites too.
So that's really what I mean. Like, outside of the controversy, not that controversy should be ignored.
Absolutely.
But he is a vital part of American film, and we cannot ignore that. And we can still talk about his work and understand and contextualize what it is, especially this story, which is a little dated.
Yeah, that's right.
Play it again,
we'll
Sam.
talk about. Yeah, so let's set up Play It Again, Sam. So this came out. So the play was in 1969. The film version came out, I believe, in May of 1972. So just very briefly, it's about a neurotic film critic obsessed with Casablanca, the movie, who attempts to get over his wife leaving him by dating again with the help of a married couple and his idol Humphrey Bogart. In a way, Humphrey Bogart is in this movie. And one of the notes I wrote down, I was like, do we think, Marcus, they had to get like rights from the Humphrey Bogart estate to use him in this, or like how did that work?
I don't think that was a thing in 1972.
Okay,
honestly, I think that seems like an 80s and beyond thing. I think that a lot of that, and this is just a guess, this is conjecture, that I think a lot of that is the rise of VHS.
Oh, okay.
Before you could control your prints, but now in VHS, everybody could have it. And then the internet came around and you had to control it more. That's why we don't get biopics of very important people. When we do have a biopic of, say, Jimi Hendrix, they don't use any of his music because the estate won't let it happen.
Yeah, biopics are interesting because it's like, sometimes I'm like, wait, how, like, do you have to get the life rights to tell that story? What's that process for? I mean, we get at least 2 or 3 a year, right? And like in theater.
and they're all very, all the interesting stuff is sucked out of them.
Right.
Why bother?
Yeah, so that's an interesting piece of this movie. And this is a Paramount film. Isn't that what it said at the beginning? Paramount. And then
I don't remember.
And then Casablanca, like Casablanca is Warner Brothers, right?
I think so. Let me look that up right quick. I don't.
But so maybe it was because I was like, I mean, this movie opens Played Against Sam with like 90 seconds, 2 minutes of just the ending of Casablanca. I'm like
5 minutes. I counted.
Is it 5 minutes? I'm like,
including the opening credits.
Well, I mean, like without even cutting to Alan, like we're just watching Casablanca, and I'm like, wait a second, if this isn't the same studio, like, did they just have to pay to use it? I mean, that's not. That's not.
You got it right. This movie was Paramount. Casablanca's Warner Brothers.
Warner Brothers. Okay, so Paramount must have had to pay Warner Brothers for that footage.
Yeah.
I wonder, maybe in 71, 72, it's not as big a deal. Like, imagine a movie today by a studio and it opens with like 2 minutes of another studio's movie. Like, well, I would be like, what's happening right now?
And I mean, I don't know the law that well, but there is such a thing as fair use. So technically on your podcast, you personally are allowed to use clips from things as long as they're not past a certain timestamp, and as long as you're not just replaying it, but you're actually commenting on it in terms of education and knowledge.
Yeah.
So this could be a fair use thing because it's only about 2 minutes on screen. The rest you hear it. But also, this was a huge play. This ran for 453 performances.
Wow!
And they brought all the original cast came along with the play to the movie. Everybody's the same.
Okay.
And Woody Allen didn't do the entire run. Bob Denver took over for him. Our old LMU alum, Mr. Gilligan. And then it went to the West End where Dudley Moore did it, and they anglicized the play. So this is a huge hit. So maybe they had the money to pay Warner Brothers.
Yeah. So I have that all written down here. The first time that Keaton met Alan was she auditioned for the play Played Against Sam. I think she got her start. Didn't she do Hair? I think she did Hair, and then her first film was 1970s Lovers and Other Strangers. I believe that's the title. Is that the title?
I don't know either of those movies.
She made her first film in 70. That's the film that Francis Ford Coppola saw her in and was like, I want her to be in The Godfather.
Yeah.
The Godfather comes out in March of 72 and then Played Against Sam in May of 72. So this is 72 is like her big like cinema breakthrough year, I would say, for Diane Keaton. But as you said, she was on the stage. She was she in the whole run, Diane Keaton?
I don't know.
She did a lot of it, at least.
No reason not to, but if she's doing movies, then she probably took some time out and at least had a replacement or understudy.
Yeah, exactly. But Dudley Moore, I would have liked to have seen that version. I can't really picture it. You know?
I can, but the reviews for that production, like, this doesn't work at all. And Dudley Moore is sort of hit or miss for me because he's also playing he plays lecherous, and that can only go so far. Woody Allen is not playing this character as lecherous, regardless of how he has written him.
Oh yeah, I would not say it's lecherous. I mean, it does get into some weird territory of him. Like he's like. He's friends with that guy and he's like hitting on, and they're married, right? Like Tony Roberts and Diane Keaton, they're married in the movie, and Woody Allen's like hitting on her and then eventually kissing her, and I'm like, wait a second, like, isn't that man your friend?
It's weird, and it's not too different in the play. Somebody actually uploaded images of the entire play, and I read that just before we started here. Cool. I speed read it because plays take 25 minutes to read.
Right. Oh, very cool. Did you notice a lot of differences between the play and the movie?
We'll get there. But honestly, not a lot other than locations. And certain things that softened the impact of a few things and made Alan a slightly better person.
Oh, interesting.
But the play, for the most part, takes place in his apartment in New York City, not San Francisco. And like, we do go to the discotheque and we do go to the museum, but those are just little flights of fancy over on a platform in a corner, according to the script. But no, like, it takes place in his apartment almost the entire time.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it was weird to see him in a film that's not set in New York, like to see this in San Francisco. So I was like, oh, that was an interesting choice by him. But I guess it was a matter of other things. Yeah. It was supposed to be shot in New York, but it moved to San Francisco when New York film workers went on strike in the summer of 71.
Okay, that was my question, because so Take the Money and Run is also shot in San Francisco and famously at San Quentin prison. There's a fun story around that. But also around this time, San Francisco is the cool place to be. Like, people's modern idea of what San Francisco is from around this time, not true at all today. And this is cool. So like you just released your episode on What's Up, Doc, which is San Francisco set. And so this transfers from New York over to San Francisco, which also happens with a later 1972 film, Butterflies Are Free. I don't know if that was about a strike or more that it's about the Goldie Hawn character being a hippie. And if you hear hippie, you think San Francisco. So this was just a thing that happened in 1972. You moved your films to San Francisco, regardless of if you understood it or if it fit, because all the information in Play It Again, Sam is very New York based, and they try to transfer it over and it doesn't quite work. And not just because his other 55 films are New York set or London or Barcelona. It feels weird. Certain references don't quite make sense. Like, they're in Marin County in Sausalito during Act 2. And he mentions going to like an Erich von Stroheim film festival. I'm like, where would you do that? In New York, that makes sense. In San Francisco, that makes sense. But in Marin County, that's a little harder to fathom.
Okay. Like, you could see Erich von Stroheim Film Festival happening in New York, not necessarily in San Francisco. Yes,
in San Francisco, not in Marin County.
Not in Marin County.
Right above it. Like when they go to Sausalito in this, they're 20 minutes from where the fog takes place.
Right.
And then if you go another 40 minutes, that's Bodega Bay. That's the Birds.
Yeah. There's some really great horror film shot out in that area. I've visited
and
some
Children
of
the Carpenter Village of the Damned is also shot out there.
Very cool. So and I mean, I feel like we really think of him as a New York filmmaker, but at Match Point and later he would shoot kind of anywhere. And Blue Jasmine, right, is in San Francisco.
That is the only time he comes back that I can recall. I might be wrong, because I don't really rewatch his movies for the most part. But yeah, Blue Jasmine returns, and also does not get San Francisco quite right. It's very much a New York story. Well, really, it's a New Orleans story, because it's A Streetcar Named Desire, just updated. It is the same general plot of that, just sort of transferred. And I really like Blue Jasmine, but it is a Tennessee Williams play, and it doesn't quite fit in San Francisco or his idea of it. But at least he shows San Francisco as it properly is, which is really foggy and cold, which say other films like just like Heaven with Reese Witherspoon and Mark Ruffalo makes it look like Los Angeles, but further north. Or the opposite, being shot in Vancouver, which, now that I'm in Seattle, I see a lot of Vancouver in Seattle set things.
Yeah. I mean, San Francisco is usually, just a great town for films. I mean, I always think about Vertigo as like one of like the classic films that uses San Francisco to its advantage. I don't know if it was used that well in Play It Again, Sam, because it is based on a play and it's mostly indoors. There were stretches of the movie where I'm like, oh, right, this is San Francisco, because like there'll be 20 minutes where we're just like inside interiors.
Well, and like it seems like Dick and Linda's apartment is in North Beach, which, it's funny watching Woody Allen run up a San Francisco hill. It just doesn't feel quite right. He's a Manhattan guy. He's on flat lands for the most part. But then when you see that sequence where Dick is saying, I think my wife's cheating on me, in the background, you see like an intersection in North Beach, San Francisco. And like, all I can think of is that's where Venom takes place.
from Play It Again, Sam to Venom.
Yeah.
That's funny. We should mention the director. We talked about him briefly earlier, but so this was directed by Herbert Ross. His feature debut as a director was Goodbye, Mr. Chips from 1969. Have you seen that movie? With Peter O'Toole?
It's an awful film.
Because, I tried to watch it once. I was like,
I watched both Goodbye, Mr. Chips. The original one is a lovely film.
I love the original from 39.
The original so good. The remake is so bad. Yeah, it's lovely. And the remake is so bad. It's him and Petula Clark?
Maybe.
But the thing is, for a while in the 70s, they didn't let people sing in musicals. They had them in their head. So it's just Peter O'Toole walking around campus like thinking songs to himself. And they even do this in Fiddler on the Roof a couple times, which is really annoying. It's a musical. Let people freaking sing. But that's a very bad thing. Well, but say so predating his first film, he is a Broadway guy. He's a Broadway actor.
Okay.
He and that he choreographs a bunch. He choreographs On a Clear Day You Can See Forever.
Okay.
He directed the TV filming of Wonderful Town, the Leonard Bernstein, Comden and Green adaptation of My Sister Eileen, which I did in high school. And he choreographed the musical sequences. He directed the musical sequences in the stage version of Funny Girl, which, you know, Barbara wins her Tony, then makes the movie, wins her Oscar, tied with Katharine Hepburn. And then Ross directs the sequel, Funny Lady, with music by Kander.
Oh, right. I saw that.
Cabaret and Chicago. So
I saw that on filmography.
Yeah. So he has this Broadway background, but then, okay, back to Goodbye, Mr. Chips and his film career. You know, I'm a theater person.
Well, that's interesting because it sounds like he would have really pursued a lot of musicals, but after Goodbye, Mr. Chips, he does The Owl and the Pussycat and Now Play It Again, Sam, which are kind of smaller non-musical comedies. So clearly he was open to other kinds of genres. Maybe because in the early 70s musicals were dying a little bit, maybe it was harder to get them off the ground. I don't know.
Musicals were Hello Dolly is considered like the last of the big musicals, and that's 1969.
Okay. Well, Fiddler on the Roof did well.
What was that?
Fiddler on the Roof did well in 71.
It did. Yes. That's because it's Fiddler on the Roof. That is an outlier. It very much is.
Yeah.
But that's also, it's filmed in a very modern way.
Okay.
Hello Dolly is directed by Gene Kelly and looks like an old musical. I adore it. I think it's an incredible film.
I had a good time.
It's just as good as the play, which I saw a few years ago on Broadway with Bette Midler, David Hyde Pierce, Santino Fontana, Beanie Feldstein, all these people.
Cool. That would have been awesome. I remember thinking like Walter Matthau and Barbara Streisand was an odd pairing.
It is. And he hated her so much. You can see it on his face, which works for the character. And God bless Barbara. I love her. She is too young to play Dolly Madison. She's in her 20s in that movie. And the point of that is she's an older woman and a matchmaker who is returning to society. That's why Hello Dolly would like to see you back where you belong. So the idea is that she's been in that club at Harmonia Gardens, which, by the way, is the name of our house right here. They're welcoming her back after many years of being gone. As a woman in her late 20s, she kills it in the role, and it's a wonderful film. She's just too young. It's because it was Carol Channing on Broadway.
You're saying something negative about Barbara Streisand?
I'm not. She's wonderful in it. It is not her fault. No. She didn't do it on stage. It is Gene Kelly's fault.
Didn't she later admit to that she was too young for it? I think she said that herself later.
Yep. So yeah, it's not my words. I'm quoting the diva herself.
She was so good in the What's Up Doc we just watched. I had never seen that before.
Oh, and you haven't seen What's Up Doc? She's incredible in that.
I'm like, okay, I had seen Last Picture Show at least 3 times. I've seen Paper Moon twice. I'm like, how did I miss the middle Bogdanovich movie?
Yeah, the Bogdanovich and his wife at the time, who just had that miniseries on You Must Remember This.
Oh, okay.
Her 3 films with him, you know, his good films.
Yeah, well, that's why I do this podcast. So like those films that somehow fell through the cracks from the 70s, I can finally check it out.
So yeah, but you're saying like, why didn't he do musicals? He was also adapting Neil Simon stuff, and he directed Neil Simon both on stage and on film. So so obviously the best director of Neil Simon is Mike Nichols, who we covered with our Carnal Knowledge episode. If you're thinking about Neil Simon adaptations, the second name you think is Ross.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm glad we talked about Nichols when we did, because between now and 83, really there's just Day of the Dolphin and what's the one from 75 with Nicholson and Beatty?
Oh God, I hated it so much. The one that the Coen brothers love.
The Fortune?
Yeah.
Okay. The Fortune. Between now and Silkwood, there's only 2 movies to talk about. I kind of am in, like, after reading Mark Harris's book, I'm intrigued by Day of the Dolphin with George C. Scott. Like, I'm like, it might be really bad, but I'm kind of looking forward to it.
I I watched all of his movies when in preparation for the Carnal Knowledge episode. It's not a boring film. It's just an unwieldy film and has no idea what tone it is. It's extremely funny, and I think I mentioned this on the podcast, is one of Tracy Morgan's favorite movies.
Oh, really? I don't remember.
So look at it through Tracy Morgan's nonsense brain.
Yeah.
And you got it. And speaking of, going back to Bogdanovich, Polly Platt was her name. I felt bad not remembering her name. There's an entire miniseries about how she actually built his career.
Oh, that's fantastic. I got to check that out. I've heard a couple episodes from that, but I need to go back.
Oh,
it's so hard because my commute to work is 10 minutes. So that usually if I had a longer commute, I could listen to more podcasts, but I don't have one right now. But that's real quick. That's why I like having you here, Marcus. Not every guest of mine will watch the entire filmography of the person we're talking about. So thank you.
Well, I've usually seen most is the thing. I just need to catch up with the last few.
Yeah. So Day of the Dolphin was not one you had seen multiple times.
No.
For Carnal Knowledge episode. Have you seen everything that Herbert Ross has made?
No, I have not. I was looking through my letterbox. I've seen a good half of them.
Okay, yeah. I'm like maybe a third.
This week I watched The Last of Sheila because he was sitting on my DVR from TCM, so on their Whodunit night from a few months ago. So I finally watched that, but I have not seen the 7% Solution or The Turning Point or Secret of My Success, Undercover Blues. And here is my greatest shame. I have not seen Steel Magnolias.
Oh, you've never seen Steel Magnolias?
I've never seen it. It's so intimidating. I really want to. And I would love to see a play of it too, because everybody loves it. It is so well regarded. And when it's something like and my mom doesn't really like movies about like women like that. Mm-hmm. So I didn't see it in theaters. I was of age. I could have seen it. And of course I know the entire story at this point and I know it by reputation, but for some reason I just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So 1977's The Turning Point, which he made about a decade before Steel Magnolias, is famous for, so I was on a podcast and they knew I was into Oscars and they gave me some Oscar questions. And the host said, what are the two films that were nominated for 11 Academy Awards and won nothing? And I immediately knew Color Purple. But I'm like, wait, what's the other movie that got 11 nominations, didn't win anything? It's The Turning Point from 77, which I also have not seen. How have neither of us seen this movie?
And I should have seen it because it's written by Arthur Lawrence, I've read both of his autobiographies, both of his memoirs. It's a guy who wrote West Side Story and Gypsy and The Way We Were.
Oh, interesting. So in his long career from the 60s to the 90s, his only Oscar nomination was for The Turning Point. So
huge movie.
I need to check that one out. And then let's see. He, of course, also made, and we'll talk about him more at the end, that same year as The Turning Point, he directed The Goodbye Girl.
Yep.
Which won Richard Dreyfuss the Oscar for Best Actor.
Well deserved, too. 1977, crazy year. That's Star Wars and Annie Hall.
Yep, and Close Encounters and some really important films.
Huge turning point of a year. And he also directed Chapter 2, the Neil Simon play on Broadway, which is a wonderful play.
He also directed Footloose from 84.
He did, which is the one that really stands out because the rest is like a bunch of like lighthearted comedies and Neil Simon stuff. And then there's Footloose, which is also... I haven't seen all of his movies, but is probably the best directed of his films.
Okay, yeah.
Because the dance sequences actually look good, which I cannot say for all of his other films, including his musicals.
Right.
And I love My Blue Heaven in 1990.
That is such an underrated flick. He directed 2 Steve Martin films.
Yeah.
Both of which I feel like have fallen through the cracks. Nobody really talks about. My Blue Heaven and Pennies from Heaven, 2 Heaven movies starring Martin.
I never saw True Colors. Oh, he directed that. I never saw Undercover Blues, which I never will.
I remember Undercover Blues. That's isn't that like a romantic comedy, like action caper with Kathleen Turner and Dennis Quaid?
Yeah.
I remember. So that was 93. So I would have been like 8 years old when I saw the trailer for Undercover Blues. And at 8, I said, no, I'm good.
It is the most 1993 film that ever existed, is what it looks like. I remember the trailer.
Yeah.
And he ends up with Boys on the Side.
I'm glad that his last film is not Undercover Blues and that is Boys on the Side, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, which I saw when I was 12, but I know it's a road trip with Whoopi, Mary Louise, and Drew Barrymore, but I only really remember in the first 20 minutes, Drew Barrymore takes off her top because I'm 12. I'm like, whoa. And And then that was when she also took off her top on Dave Letterman.
Was she promoting that movie?
I don't know if she was promoting. She was kind of, remember, this is when she's trying to be a wild girl at the time because she's known as a kid actor, and this is her transitionary period. And when she did that thing on Letterman, Steven Spielberg sent her a letter. It was really an image of like early Photoshop of him covering up her body with fake clothes. like you child, don't do
Godfather.
that.
Right?
And the only other thing I remember about Boys on the Side is that Mary Louise Parker character has AIDS. That's all I remember about it, because it is a 1995 film and it's a drama, and so it has to have AIDS.
True. I did like the movie though. I saw it for the first time in the last 5 years. It was fairly recent. I can't remember why I watched it. It might have just been on. It might have been one of those things where it was on like TCM as like a later or something, and I just was like, oh, I've never seen this. And I'm a huge fan of all three of those actresses, and I enjoyed it.
I have not seen it since theaters.
Yeah, but we'll talk about some of these more at the end. So I believe it's his third film as director is Play It Again, Sam. His second film was The Owl and the Pussycat, which we talked about on the podcast, one of the first episodes.
Nice.
Where I had some issues with that movie, but it was fine. It was fun. I think Play It Again, Sam is definitely better than that.
Yeah.
So I was curious to know like why Woody Allen didn't direct the movie.
I don't know.
I think look up his quote. I found a quote.
Oh, go for it.
I was like, is there a quote? I found it. So he said, in a 1972 interview, he was asked why he didn't direct it. He said, I would never want to direct a play into a movie. I would only be interested in working on original projects for the screen. I was already at work on everything you always wanted to know about sex, but we're afraid to ask what a title that is. And I didn't want to spend a year doing a project I had already done on Broadway, which makes sense.
It does. And also, like, his first three films and all of his films around this point are way more inventive because he's actually playing with the camera. Some of them are kind of mockumentaries. I was reading like the New York Times or the New Yorker review of Play It Again, Sam. They're like, this is actually very ordinary compared to his other stuff. Like in this one, in this story, you can't have like Howard Cosell narrate an assassination. So yeah, honestly, it would be him going backwards. So so that quote would have been my guess as to why he didn't want to do it. And also, he's already done it. He spent a year on Broadway with it, and he wrote it for the stage. And while he is not the most visual director, he has an eye for camera. And when you're watching a Woody Allen film, I cannot quite say that about Harold Ross.
Okay,
he's for somebody who has so much stage history, he just kind of, and this is actually kind of why, because he has a stage history, he just sort of locks the camera down and lets things happen. There's no real rhyme or reason to why he moves things around. You mentioned The Owl and the Pussycat, which I just watched a couple months ago, which takes place basically in two rooms. Yeah, and it's very well written, and Barbara and Siegel are great in it, but it is very compact. And when he tries to open it up, which you should do with these things, he doesn't really do it with any kind of dynamic reason.
Right.
Same with here.
The directing of it, there was nothing that would make me think that like Woody Allen just didn't direct it himself. Like there's nothing in the movie stylistically that makes me think, oh, this is clearly the work of Ross. Although there are some moments of whimsy, and I liked some of the playfulness of the medium using kind of dream sequences like in the middle of realistic moments. That's something I feel like I haven't seen in a lot of early 70s films.
No,
where it's like he's talking to Diane Keaton as Bogart's talking to him behind, and that she can't hear Bogart, but the way that it's almost shot so matter of factly, like it's kind of you have to get into it because
it's really weird. Because the thing is, and also like the way, so the play is a lot of monologue, and the monologues are still here. They're cut down a little bit, but instead of either breaking the fourth wall, which Woody Allen consistently does, especially in Annie Hall, most famously in Annie Hall, or narration during montages, which he also uses very often, this is usually just a character mumbling to himself, which Woody as a director would never do. But Harold Ross, it feels like he got a little defensive about what was happening and didn't want it to feel too stagey, even though it is very stagey. So it feels like Woody Allen, but isn't quite there. I feel like you can tell because Harold Ross is sort of a stylistic vacuum, and he never really recovers from that. All his movies are kind of matter of fact, as you said. And the thing is, and the one credit we didn't get to, he choreographed this wonderful British Cliff Richard musical called Summer Holiday, which nobody talks about. It was hard to find when I saw it. It's finally readily available, but it's a wonderful road trip comedy through Europe. And it's directed by Peter Yates. His first film, I think, back when he was still just making random British films. The musical sequences that are incredible. So I don't know what happened between then and now.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I still have to see The Turning Point, which obviously was very beloved in '77. I don't think Ross was a very like visionary director who could really create like stunning, cinematography. It seems like he just let the story play out in the best way he could, and some directors did that, and that's fine.
And some playwrights want that. That's why his Neil Simon ones are, also not that aggressively stylistic, because he's letting Neil Simon tell the story. The one time he does bring in a bit of style is The Goodbye Girl, which we'll get to a little bit later.
Okay. Very cool.
Which is not based on a play, but then becomes a Tony-nominated Broadway musical in the 90s.
Oh, I thought The Goodbye Girl was based on a play by Neil Simon, no?
It is Neil Simon, it's one of his original screenplays.
Neil Simon wrote that as a screenplay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. If I had to guess, I would have guessed that was based on a play.
Yeah, because all Neil Simon things kind of feel the exact same. It's
like on Twitter a few hours ago, and I discovered that The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King was not nominated for Best Cinematography. And I was in shock.
What? But it won all the things. It was not.
It got nominated for 11 Oscars, and it won all 11. Spielberg, when he announced Best Picture, it's a sweep. And then I was just like talking about, did it deserve all 11? Is there any that it, should have gotten a nomination for something else? And three people wrote, well, yeah, it should have gotten a cinematography nomination.
No, okay, The Goodbye Girl is not a play. The original screenplay, coincidentally, is called Bogart Slept Here.
Bogart Slept Here.
And it was going to be...
Isn't that the Mike Nichols movie that was in production and then got shut down?
Yes, Mike Nichols was set to direct.
Yeah, no, he was like in the Mark Harris book. He talks about they were filming it with De Niro.
De Niro, who was wrong for Neil Simon. Now, so Neil Simon, also not as controversial as Woody Allen, but has a lot of the same issues. Like how he writes women isn't wonderful. But about 12 years ago, I read every single Neil Simon play I could get my hands on in order. Only 3 of them were not available at the library. So cool. I learned about like how he sort of grew and how he sort of externalized his emotions in the same way that Woody Allen does, in both good ways and sort of cringy ways. But I would say Neil Simon there's an openness to him that I feel like from Woody Allen can be a little performative, but maybe I'm wrong about that too. Maybe Neil Simon stuff is just as performative as anything else. But yes, Goodbye Girl was meant to be a Mike Nichols movie, and then he moved on.
Interesting. Yeah, Neil Simon, I love a lot of his films and plays. Plaza Suite was a little cringy. We watched that.
Yep.
And I guess Broderick and Parker are doing it in New York.
It opens next month. It was supposed to come out 2 years ago, and I was going to see it 2 years ago. Yeah.
Oh wow. So yeah, no, I watched. There was a segment on YouTube of, I think it was CBS This Morning, or what's that called, that show, and they interviewed them, and they were like a week away from the premiere and like the first night, opening night, and they were told one night, they said, you have 20 minutes to gather your things. We are shutting this theater down.
And it's directed by John Benjamin Hickey, who's a wonderful idea to direct that. And I saw the Tony Award winning, it won the Tony afterwards, The Inheritance, and he was in the older character, but he had left to direct Plaza Suite. So I saw Tony Goldwyn in that role instead.
Okay, interesting. I'd love to see if they made any adjustments for Plaza Suite.
I hope so, and I won't be able to see it because I won't be going. I go to New York in January, and I would have gone this year, but Omicron and most of the shit, shut down.
Yeah.
Plaza Suite is very cringy. California Suite, directed by Harold Ross, also a little cringy, and I saw London Suite in Chicago once, and then they made that into a TV movie with Kelsey Grammer.
Are these all related? Are these all like connected in any way with the suite in the title?
Other than no, it's just they all take place in the same hotel room in each of these cities. So it's a trilogy. It's a hotel trilogy. And Plaza Suite is pretty funny. Like, it's very quippy, but it is dated.
Well, I remember the second segment with Barbara Hershey and like film producer like hitting on her with like, my guest said she almost turned the movie off.
Which makes sense. And the same thing kind of happens with one of Neil Simon's, I would say, better but also cringy plays, The Last of the Red Hot Lovers, which is about a one-man he's trying to have an affair, and each act is with a different woman.
Oh, yeah. See, that's the stuff. It doesn't quite. I mean, even if you get just a really talented ensemble, it's still just a little cringy today. Some of these plays from 50 years ago. I mean, like you mentioned at the top that you thought Played Against Sam was dated. Can you talk about that a little bit now? Like what about it do you find dated?
So, well, first of all, I think, like, even though this is my second time watching, I'm consistently laughing at this. The one-liners are so good. I kept on writing them down, and I already filled up a page. I'm like, I should stop writing down these lines because that's not what this podcast is about. But the thing is, so like, this is how movies were and stories were 50 years ago. We can't quite do this now. If you do, it's like a small, weird, cringy indie, which is a different thing. But this is being played for laughs. So, like, he comes around, like, he's being very open about his own foibles, that, like, am I a sex maniac for wanting my best friend's wife? What's going on with me? And then when he sort of tries to seduce her, it's a very funny scene, and it's also both the best and the worst scene in it, because they have a side conversation about sexual assault. And the thing is, the story of this, like, it is about a man learning that, like, say, the Hollywood of 30, 40 years ago does not apply to today. And we can't use Bogart's advice of, like, slapping women and then shooting some bourbon afterwards. That's right. Likewise, 72 to now, this is a story about a man who basically wants us to applaud him for not being a creep.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's basically, yeah. I mean, this is not one of his more, like, likable characters, I would say.
No.
I mean, he's kind of like, I mean, if it was a different actor, like, it could have been really devious and hard to watch. I mean, because it's him, like, you're just, you can kind of laugh at what he's saying and the the lines and things, but some of the things he does in this movie, it's kind of, like, questionable.
And he's always been a little weird with women, and unfortunately, like, all his movies are about women.
Right? Did he ever make just a buddy comedy just with another guy and there's no women in it?
I mean,
I don't think he ever did.
No,
I mean, mostly love stories.
He was in a remake of The Sunshine Boys.
Oh, okay.
Original directed by Herbert Ross.
Oh, okay.
Which is a better play than it is a movie.
Okay.
But George Burns wins Best Supporting Actor for it, so I highly recommend it. He and Walter Matthau are great in it, but they cut a couple of things that I think make the play work better.
Yeah, I haven't seen either version. There's that one I know of that got the Oscar win, but then Alan was in a version later.
I think it was a TV
movie. Oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah, remember in the 90s we had a bunch of remakes of, like, things from the 50s, 60s.
I remember
70s.
Didn't they remake Don't Drink the Water, like,
with Michael J. Fox?
With Michael J. Fox.
Yeah. Fun play, a little racist.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, because it's about a fake foreign country and, like, a war breaking out.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, there were it wasn't as dated to me as some of the other films we've looked at where I really struggle. Like, I found, like, there were just some moments here and there. I mean, it's mostly a pretty enjoyable comedy, and it's brief. It's 85 minutes. I mean, it just flies by
for a 3-act play. Yeah.
Did you find one of my problems with the movie? It felt like the ending was rushed. Like, it felt like there was something missing. It's like we have the romance with Keaton, and then that kind of falls apart, and then it's the tribute to Casablanca. It felt like there was even just 10 minutes. There was, like, it felt like something was missing. It felt like we went from, like, we're towards the end of Act 2, and then it's the end of Act 3. Like, it went from, like, one to the next.
Yeah. So we're talking about the movie, not the play, but the play is in 3 acts, which was a thing in the 60s and 70s, but not really so much anymore. Thank God. We'll be at the theater forever, which nobody really wants. Most theaters are not comfortable, unfortunately. So the Act 1 ends with that bad first, the blind date he's on.
That's right.
And then Act 2 ends with Diane Keaton coming back in to the apartment and kissing him after running off. And Act 3 starts with them in bed. And actually in the play, Act 3 is pretty short too. It's him just kind of going around in his head. And then he has the image, the fantasy of Tony Roberts as in Italian film. And then he gets in and it's different. He gets in a different fight with Bogart, who does not get shot in the play. And it's Linda who pulls out the gun, not the image of his ex-wife. So there's actually, honestly, there's more in the film, because the play does not have, what is the, I think, best scene in the film is when he runs into his ex-wife, and she's a perfectly nice, well-adjusted woman, not at all like the fantasy he has. That is not in the play. And also,
interesting.
And also in the play, it ends in his apartment, and he's like, he does the Casablanca speech, but he's like, go home to your husband who wants to go back to Cleveland. And then
they don't do the whole airplane sequence like in the play. It's just he's still in his apartment.
And Dick is not there. And so the movie has the additional thing, which I think is a smart move, where he lies for Linda, and he says, we did not sleep together. I'm just in love with her. She's in love with you. Don't worry about it. That is not in the play.
Interesting.
And at the end of the play, so she leaves, and then a woman knocks on his door. She's like, I'm your neighbor. Can I use your phone? Oh, you write for Film Comment? I love your writing. And he's like, well, let me tell you about Humphrey Bogart. Curtain.
Oh, interesting.
So the movie has it better. So yeah, it is a little rushed, because here's the thing. So what was surprising about this, like, I remember the Flights of Fancy, all the bogey stuff, all the ex-wife stuff, all the fourth wall breaking. And the other thing I remember was Tony Roberts constantly giving phone numbers on the phone, which is a very funny runner. And I remember the intellectual woman at the museum. Everything else I forgot, and I realize now it's because it's a very ordinary story. This is ordinary for him. I see why he wouldn't want to direct this. This is going backwards for him. So basically, like, he divorces, he goes through some funny bad dates, he falls in love with the wrong woman, they make a mistake, he realizes he made a mistake, he says, maybe I shouldn't be a creep and listen to like this weird 1940s fantasy character. Please go on, I'll be okay. So yeah, it is a very straightforward story, and honestly, adding more, like, yes, I want more from it, but what more could there be that wouldn't just spin the wheels?
Right. I mean, maybe like before the two are kissing and at the end of Act 2, like maybe a little bit more dynamics between them, like building their relationship more, because she's always kind of with her husband, and then as soon as the husband's gone, then they start. And it just felt a little fast. Like, I felt like that could have been explored more, but it's not that kind of movie. It's not late 70s Alan. It's kind of like it's a little bit fluffier. I mean, there's that bit with the hair dryer, and it's got a lot. We're in the era of the visual gags with him, and it doesn't have as many as like Bananas or Everything You Always Want to Know About Sex, but it's a different. I feel like if this movie had been made in like 78 or 79 with Alan, even if he didn't direct it, it would have had a different quality to it, I think.
Yeah, and yeah, since it's not a lot. Since it's 3 acts. As the play can't be that long, especially for a lighthearted comedy. You want to get them in and out in 2 hours. And 3 acts is tough. Like nowadays, if you do a 3-act play, like say the Tony Whitting The Ferryman, the first intermission is 15 minutes, like a normal thing. The second intermission is 5 minutes, stand up, stretch, do not go to the bathroom, sit back down. Which I like. I like the way my sister works in theater. She says, I either want the play to be 90 minutes and no intermission, or 4 hours long, nowhere in between.
Yeah. That where you have a 20-minute intermission and we're at like 2/3 of the way through, and then you have an intermission, then you come back, and then there's just like a little bit left. It kind of feels like, let's just watch the whole thing.
Right. I mean, people got to go to the bathroom, and I get that. But right now, like 90 minutes, no intermission is the current standard for a lot of things, for dramas and comedies and non-musicals, and I say thank God.
What's the longest the show can be without an intermission?
I mean, however long you want.
Oh, okay.
There's no legal rule, but people are going to stand up in your play. Like, for instance, this might not be true anymore. When I saw Dear Evan Hansen with the original cast like 4 or 5 years ago, because it's such an intense emotional experience, especially the play and not the movie, if you get out of your seat, they are not letting you back in until intermission.
Oh, really? Like if you get up like not at intermission, they won't let you back in the theater.
Correct. Because also Broadway theaters for the most part are pretty small. And that's the Music Box, which is not a big theater. So but Ben Platt will see you when he is crying, and he does not want that. It is a hard role to do 8 times a week.
Yeah, here in Reno, we have some small like local theaters, and there's one where I went to a show. I can't remember what it was, but this was actually a theater that did a version of Steel Magnolias and did a great job. It was amazing. Speaking of Steel Magnolias, but there was a show where I had to use the bathroom, and I would have had to walk around the actors to get to the door.
Yep. Oh my God.
So I had to just sit there and wait for it. They did have an intermission like 20 minutes later, so I was okay. But I was like,
I know that's rough. There's a local theater here where if you flush the toilet, everybody will hear it.
the actors have to ignore it and continue.
Well, they strongly suggest you don't do that. And they sort of program around that idea, like either it's a short play or they intermission it correctly.
Okay. They ask you politely to not use the restroom.
Yeah, there's a sign on either. It's like, do your business now.
I love the idea of it being just like a very serious play, a very quiet, introspective, and then there goes the toilet during like the most important moment towards the end.
Oh my God. and also I know at that theater, on one wing, if you need to, they do a lot of entrances from the lobby as opposed to the side. On one side, you have to run to the bathroom to do that. It's connected to backstage.
But I'm like,
it's a wonderful theater. They have great programming. It just happens.
I mean, yeah. Sometimes you have to use the restroom. It is more difficult when you have to walk around the actors as they're performing.
Oh, it's so rough. No, I get it. I work in black box theaters. I understand. It is hard to miss. So if you are standing up, you are making a pointed gesture.
I remember as a kid, they don't really have this anymore because there's more space. I remember as a kid in the 90s, just at the movies, like you'd go to you'd be in a crowded theater for a film and you'd be in the middle of an aisle, or you'd be in like the middle of the row and there'd be 10 people this way, 10 people that way, and I have to go to the bathroom. It's an ordeal. So remember in the 90s, like you didn't have much space. Like you had to really kind of like climb over everybody. And so you had to really have to go if you were going to make that scene.
Yeah.
Do we think Play It Again, Sam has played it all like in the last 20 years at any theaters? Has it? Okay. Did you? I tried to find information on that if it was still playing anywhere.
On the literally on the Wikipedia page, the photo they use for the play is from a fairly recent production.
Okay, so clearly I didn't look close.
Yeah. Well, no, also like, we live in cities. This is more of a community theater type stuff. The people who still do Neil Simon still sometimes happens in the city, but then there'll be a contingent of people saying, are we still doing the same freaking old white man crap from 40, 50 years ago? Can we do something new? And Seattle is very good about that. And I don't really pay too much attention to the suburbs. Some of them do really good work, but those are the ones that are really closer to the city. I just don't know. So community and regional theater, I'm sure, has done this at some point. The play, the image of the play I read this morning actually had marks in it from a director or a dramaturg. And the one, they made one change to the entire thing. Every time he mentions the word discotheque, it's crossed out and says club. So this must have been a more recent production to make that change, because discotheque in American lingo is a very particular point in time that is not around anymore. In France, for instance, it's still called a discotheque, but not here.
Okay.
So yeah, because the thing is, it's short, it's quippy, it only has 12 characters, and a lot of those are double cast. This is a cheap and easy play to do. So the only thing that would stop people from doing it is the controversy of Woody Allen's name himself, which honestly a lot of people outside of film world don't really know about. Or off film Twitter, or it's it's not sexist, but it's a little naive about women.
That's interesting, because I mean, how many plays did Woody Allen write? I mean, he has a bunch, right?
He has a bunch, and I think I've read all of them. Even the one from like 15 years ago when he did a trilogy of one acts. I read that. I didn't see it because that is the darkness within me, is that I will still see his films and read his books, but I will not pay for them. Go to the library. I have seen his recent expat movies. I did not pay to see them. Wink, wink.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the plays, I think you're right. I think if you're going to, put something on the stage that's written by Woody Allen, but you modernize it, you have a obviously different cast. I feel like that's more appropriate than like if someone were to do today, like a Woody Allen film retrospective somewhere. I don't think you're going to see that.
Right. And when I say it feels a little dated, it's not just like in like social ways. It's that you see a lot of the themes he would constantly use, a lot of the tricks, and they're a little ground level. Like the thing is, like all the standard stuff, like he wants sex, but is completely intimidated by it, and an idiot when he's faced with it. This is a constant through line of Woody Allen's work, especially the ones that he stars in. His hatred of alcohol, marijuana, drugs in general, cigarettes, that's all here. His anti woo-woo stance, like she mentions astrology and he kind of cringes and he kind of makes fun of it for a little bit, and he's always trying to build himself as like this big macho man who thinks he can get like blondes with big chests
Yeah.
and, you know, short skirts, which is in his character is always very funny. This stuff he revisits and matures and tightens and finesses. And here it just feels a little sloppy in retrospect. Had I never seen another Woody Allen film or play, or this was the first thing I saw, I'm like, yeah, this is really funny. It's an extremely funny play. It is nonstop laughs. Even the darkest jokes are really good. Like the museum girl is such a funny bit of dialogue because, you know, she and my mom has actually quoted this back to me because she raised me on Woody Allen films, and so did my father. But you know, she talks about, like, you know, what does this mean to you? And she's like, horror and degradation, the emptiness of existence. And he says, what are you doing Saturday night? And she says, committing suicide. Well, what about Friday night? It's a dark joke, and it's a tough joke to get away with today, but it is timed so well, it is written so well, it is performed so well, and people haven't forgotten it in 50 years. It's just such a good gag.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, there's some great lines. I think the loudest I laughed was the line about the frozen dinner. I think was my favorite line in the whole thing.
The hardest I laughed is
who bothers to cook them?
Yeah.
TV, who bothers to cook them? I suck them frozen. That's a great
just
line.
Very silly. Because he's a little more fanciful than Neil Simon, who I know I could keep comparing him to, but they wrote for the same show with Carl Reiner, and you can tell that they all influenced each other.
Yeah.
I like It's a Good Terminal, I've thrown up there. But the hardest I laughed is when he's at the discotheque and Diane Keaton's like, dance with that woman. He's like, 1, 2, 1, 2. And he goes back to her. She's like, do more. And he goes back and goes, 3, 4, 3, 4. Because when Woody Allen knows his character's being lecherous, he gets this weird little crunchy face that is just so funny because you don't expect it from him, which is the joke that in another actor's hands, maybe Dudley Moore, would just come off as creepy.
Right.
The creepiness now is us looking back 50 years as, like, quote unquote woke liberals in the 21st century who, like, went to a liberal arts college.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Let's see a few other things. What, like, the title, Play It Again, Sam. Is that where the error came from? Because Humphrey Bogart never says Play It Again, Sam in Casablanca. Did that come from this title of this
I
play?
don't think so. I feel like that is one of the things that happened nonstop. Like, like the Sunset Boulevard mistake has also just been long running for
which one from Sunset Boulevard?
The final line. People get it wrong.
Oh, what do people say?
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. That is not the line.
Oh,
and now, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Yeah.
That's the line.
I
know it's like your favorite movie.
Lines. Oh, yeah.
Your favorite movie. And also, like, you know, our generation knows that line through Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah. No, she says, all right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. Right. That's the line.
Yeah. And people get that wrong. I think this is already in the lexicon. Because that would be such a silly thing to do, but it's, you know, play it, Sam, play as time goes by.
Yeah, she says play it, Sam.
Yeah,
but she doesn't say play it again, Sam.
Yeah, which is, you know, play it again, Sam just has a better rhythm to it.
Right. If this movie had been called Play It, Sam, play as time goes by, it wouldn't have as much.
No. So no, he's because the thing is, this and a lot of his other movies are about movies and about art and about our shared pop culture knowledge. So if he made that up and started that, I would be surprised.
Okay. Yeah. I think the title is fitting, and you know, we've talked about it a little bit, but I do think that opening the movie with him watching Casablanca over the opening credits and having that be as long as it is in an 85-minute movie, I do think it gets really good payoff at the end.
Oh yeah,
when we get this just beautiful sequence. Like, I mean, I don't want to knock Herbert Ross as not having style or not being able to create a visually beautiful moment. I do think that the homage to Casablanca of the last few minutes of Play It Again, Sam looks great, and it's like the fog and where the camera is placed and his walking away. I know we're kind of just, you know, paying homage to this other movie, but I thought that looked really great, like the way they pulled that off.
It does, and the thing is, that's because there's already a frame of reference. You know, like both of us went to film school and neither of us are directors anymore for a reason. And we've talked about this in one of our earlier talks, that like, it's just hard. And sometimes we can't, so I can't always wrap my head around that. Like I'm better at it now. And honestly, had I trained myself to do it, I would be better, which is what I think I've done with my writing. I just thought, writing makes sense to me, and I'm going to get better just by doing and doing and doing until it improves.
Right.
Directing, I don't know if Harold Ross just has an eye for cinema. He has an ear for actors, and that's really important. And that is one kind of filmmaking. But recently I'm trying to consider, like, what film means, if it is just a vessel for storytelling or if it is its own thing, because it is its own thing. It is a visual thing, and that's how you should start it from a ground level. And it's taken me almost 40 years to sort of wrap my head around that, because both of us are watchers. We are consumers. Not doers. We're watching, and that's a line in this.
Did that
I'm a watcher, not a doer.
I was like, oh, I don't like that. I mean, it was kind of like talking to everybody watching the movie and
I know.
who loves film. That idea of, like, I remember a girl in high school said that to me once. She said, I don't understand why you get joy out of watching all of these movies. Like, you're just sitting there watching. Wouldn't you rather go out and do stuff? A girl said that to me once when I was like 17.
Rude.
And I'm like, go away. And because I never think of it that way. Like, oh, instead of going out on a Saturday and having some kind of a quote unquote adventure or something, like to sit and watch a couple great films or talk with a great guest like you about a film, that to me is, for me, like a better day. And that's just, everybody's different, and that's okay.
It takes all kinds. But yeah, like, you ended up, you're a writer and a teacher.
Yeah.
I'm a writer and a film programmer, and I feel comfortable. Like, my sister went to film. She went to theater. She studied theater at USC with a minor in cinema. And now she works at Berkeley Repertory Theater. She's not an actor. She's not a director. But she's in the role that she feels where her talents are best used, and she's thriving there. And that's really cool.
I think you have to find that, if you're just going after something because you think it's what you should be doing, or, well, I'm just going to go after this dream my whole life, because if it doesn't work out, then I might as well be dead. Like that, I don't like that mentality.
No.
I think you should, by your 30s, you should land on what makes you happy. And if you have to give up a couple things that maybe you wanted in your teens and 20s, it's okay.
Yeah. And I will say, and this is not an insult, that is a very millennial way of looking at things.
Okay.
Because, and this is not anything about me and my family personally, but I think a lot of us looked at our parents and saw how hard they worked and how unhappy they could be.
Yes.
And we had the means, because they had the money. They grew up through a boom, like a post-war boom in the economy, like, and we saw that there was a way to be happy, and that as we become a less religious nation, we know there is nothing after for us. This is our one chance. Have a good time and don't hurt anybody in the process.
Absolutely.
So,
well said.
Woody Allen films. This is a
very spiritual.
This is a movie about a film critic who, in all of his movies, he wrestles with spirituality and woo-woo stuff. But he is a watcher, not a doer, and that's what his stories are about. I'm trying my best to tie this all together, which
you
I
do
know
a great job.
But
segue.
Because he's somebody who, as you and I both probably do, we define a lot of our mentality, our emotions, our morality through these stories that were, at the time, not always representative of reality, especially from 1934 to 1968 in the United States while the Hays Code is happening. And he learns that, like, what a tough guy is in the 1930s, 1940s is not what a tough guy should be in modern times, or if being a tough guy is even a thing you should aspire to be. And for that, it's very wise. So this is a film I would love to watch again. I wish I had time to watch it twice, but I am currently writing about 150 films and did not have the time.
You have a lot of films to get to. I did want to mention real quick that actress's name, Susan Onspach, plays the woman who he's married to, who they break up, and she was in maybe my favorite film still I've watched for the podcast. Maybe not with The Godfather I just recorded, but Five Easy Pieces, which was my first episode. She is like the kind of the lead female in that. She's mostly in like the second half, but I think she is a great actress. I was really happy to see her in this, and I had seen this movie once before, but I forgot that she was a part of it, and so I was happy to see her again. And and as you said, that scene where she she's not a witch when she sees him again. You know, she's not being horrible to him. And I really think she brings something to this too, beyond obviously Diane Keaton's role, who, you know, she's obviously great too.
And that's what's interesting about this movie, that like cringy things happen, but he makes it very clear this is his weird neuroses and his weird fantasy. So his images of his ex-wife in his fantasy are, you know, very cruel and mean, but he's somebody who is suffering. At least he tells us he's suffering. He seems to be doing pretty fine, honestly, mentally. He's just, you know, neurotic, which is normal for most of us. And then, you know, we see her as, like you say, this witch, and then we see her, you know, wield, like entering his fantasy, like when he's trying to figure out what to do with Diane Keaton, she comes in with a gun, and she and Bogey start arguing with each other.
Yeah.
And then she shoots him, and that's what I'm saying. That's my favorite scene and my least favorite scene, because for one, that stuff's really funny and very smart and very wise. But in the second one, he, for a good 20 seconds, forces himself onto Diane Keaton, which is something you can never get away with now, ever. Yeah. And then they make a joke out of it because she knocks over his lamp, and then instead of, while they're making out, they keep talking about the broken lamp and how she'll pay. But it all comes off like it's slightly misdirected. Maybe if it was a little more slapsticky and a little less creepy, then it would feel better. I would still not direct the scene that way. On the off chance I directed a play of this, which I would not, I would stage that completely differently.
Yeah, I think that it takes away a little bit from the whimsy of and the fantasy elements that make that scene really interesting. I think that part doesn't work as well. Do you like Woody Allen and Diane Keaton as a screen couple? Like, in terms of, I mean, they had, I think, 8 collaborations together. Like, what do you think of them as a screen couple?
I do. I was kind of raised to not like Diane Keaton, so it took it took me a few decades to actually like see, oh, this is really cool what she's doing and how she really was. And also, and I don't need to tell it because it's a boring story, but I did sell her books once at Borders in Westwood, Los Angeles.
Oh, so we've both met her. I met her too.
Oh, cool. When did you meet her?
She came to Reno to sell her wine, the Keaton.
Ooh, that sounds much more fun than
she came to Whispering Vine, which is like this small wine place in town, and my mom got an email about it a month ahead, said Diane's coming. so I remember I had like a class and it ended, and that day in that class, and it is something I had programmed in my syllabus months before, we were watching Marvin's Room that day. I was like, what are the odds that I would be meeting her the day I'm showing Marvin's Room to my students?
She's great. Strange. She's great in Annie Hall. She's great in Sleeper. She's great in Manhattan. But I actually kind of like her post Woody Allen, like Marvin's Room, like you say.
Yeah.
Marvin's Room it's a lovely and underrated film. It's a little schmoopy, but that's a little bit schmoopy.
Yeah, I had the casting director on Film at 50 in September. We talked mostly about the First Wives Club, which was celebrating its 25th anniversary.
Really fun movie.
Marvin's Room was also celebrating its 25th anniversary last year, so I wanted to ask her about that. And it was a fascinating. She said she was working on both films at the same time, and you know, and she's the one who said Diane Keaton should play this role. Like before, they were talking about like Angelica Houston, some other actresses, and she was all big on Diane Keaton. Of course, she's in both of those films. So I think Diane Keaton's career is really fascinating.
Yeah,
I have not really loved her output of the last 15 years. It's been really junky and just not.
How much
good.
of that is her fault, though? Or how much of that is just her being a woman past 35?
No, it is not her fault at all. Okay. But the fact that she shows up almost every year in something, and every time I'm like, come on, let's get one more just like great Keaton performance.
Like, what is it called? Her Mandy Moore, Because I Said So?
Because I Said So. I don't
Michael
even know
Lehman film.
That.
Also, Michael Lehman, who now is in TV land. Like he's done directing cinema.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I watched Palms on a plane and I kind of enjoyed myself, but I'm like,
Right, it's all these old boomer movies that just aren't for us, which is fine. God bless them. They are made for airplanes, and that's super cool. Was she in like Book Club? I didn't even see that one.
Oh, I liked Book Club. That was
it good? Okay, because that's a good cast. Like I
took
all
my
those
mom
women.
to Book Club and we had a good time.
Okay, yeah, that's a perfect thing. If my mom liked that kind of film, then that's a good thing, but she does not like that kind of
Sometimes
film.
A movie can coast on the stars. I mean, Book Club, I think with a different set of actresses might have just been okay.
Yeah.
But it's Diane Keaton, Jane Fonda, Mary Steenburgen, and Candice Bergen is hilarious in it. And great. It's one of those, like, you kind of forget it a day later, but it in the moment, like, it's really fun.
If I watched movies on commercial cable, that would be a thing I would watch.
Yeah, I would say of her last 10 years, I liked her in Morning Glory. I thought that was a pretty decent film.
That was
like fine. She was good in that with Harrison Ford.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that was
Rachel McAdams.
Yeah, it's directed by Roger Mitchell.
Mitchell, Roger Mitchell, is that his name? Yeah, he just
yeah,
passed away recently, I think.
Yeah. I really like that movie, actually.
Yeah,
I
was
forgot
fun.
That was her, because I love Rachel McAdams so much. And Harrison Ford just sleeps through everything now, which is fine, because it's hilarious, because that's what he's always done. He's like, when can I be off set so I can, get high and fly a plane and crash a plane?
No, I don't think he has slept walk. There was one. What was that one?
He's funny.
he was in a film like the same year, The Age of Adeline.
Yes, with What's About from Gossip Girl. He's great in that. You're right.
He was good in that, and he was good in the Jackie Robinson movie.
Didn't see 42.
42. He was good in that too, though he's not always sleepwalking. Sometimes
all right, he's not Bruce Willis.
He's not Bruce Willis making his 17 VOD action movies a year.
Yeah, like, get your money. Get your money.
It's like I just watched Pig with Nicolas Cage, and Nicolas Cage does not walk. He does not walk through movies, but there is like this sense of he's in so much content lately that it's kind of like it's overwhelming, that I don't really know even where to begin with him now.
Exactly, which is
and
why
Pig kind of like it stepped away from all of those other films, and I read a lot of great reviews, and I finally, it's on Hulu. I watched it the other night, and I was completely bowled over by him in that. I just was like. This guy is so good. He needs to, I don't know, slow down and like just find some better parts. I don't know what's going on with him.
Well, I mean,
he's great.
And a lot of that is, at least, for the last 10, 15 years, it's because, he was in massive amounts of debt.
He's needed money. Which,
yes,
do you even make very much, like a movie like Pig? I mean, they're not paying him very much for a movie.
No,
like
but
that,
he
right?
makes so many a year, like Jiu-Jitsu. But Pig, the thing is, that's why Pig didn't get more awards attention, because people thought it was just another freaking Nick Cage movie, and it's not. It's a great independent film. Thank God it got some Indie Spirit nominations.
Oh,
that should have been nominated for Best Actor and Best Original Screenplay at the Oscars, but it was too small, and Neon did their best, but they released it in like July or August, which also is not where you release a movie if you want Oscar attention. But I saw that because it's a Portland set film, it actually played very big here in Seattle. I saw it, they showed it on their, not IMAX, but the large format screen, just technically a bigger screen. I saw it on a huge screen, which is so weird to watch Pig on an IMAX size screen.
That's funny. Don't they diss Seattle in a line?
They do.
What did the Seattle? What was the Seattle reaction to that?
We laughed our ass off. Because the thing is, we like Portland. We like Portland just fine. Portland's hella fun.
That's funny. Yeah. I just really responded to that movie, and some of these actors where they're just it's almost too much, like Diane Keaton, where they're just in so many films, and it gets to a point where sometimes you just assume the next one will be as bad as the last one, and that's not always the case. So I have hope for Diane. I'm like, come on, she's gotten 4 Oscar nominations. She won for Annie Hall. I'm like, doesn't somebody have like a great, like rich role for her in the next 5 years? And
Nancy Meyers has passed the baton on to her daughter for these movies.
I guess, yeah.
Because she was in was that Something's Gotta Give? She's really good in that.
Something's Gotta Give. She is a delight in that film. Jack Nicholson's great in that. I miss Jack. Jack's a great actor. I guess he gave up acting in 2010, but I miss him too. But yeah, so Diane Keaton, I've really just always responded to her work, to the point where in 2017, I think, I watched everything she was in. I did a year of Diane and got to see some like Little Drummer Girl.
Oh, yeah.
And that was great. Was that the director of is that Herbert Ross?
No.
Am I thinking of somebody else? Who am I thinking of? I just looked up that movie for something recently. But she did some great, obviously dramatic work later on, but in the early years, it's kind of like Woody Allen and The Godfather.
George Roy Hill directed
George Roy Hill. Okay, I just looked him up for what did we just did an episode on him recently. George Roy Hill. Some great directors at this time, just really terrific.
I don't know why. Like I saying, like I actually do like her Allen stuff, because I forgot that she's the lead in Love and Death, which is such a weird movie and a very very singular film that I wish more people talked about.
Love and Death.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, do you think that's kind of the Woody Allen film of the 70s that's a little bit underrated? Not as many people see that one.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about it more than say like everything you want to know about sex. But yeah, so you saw Reds, which is a wonderful film.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, she's lovely in the Father of the Bride movies, which are seminal 90s films.
Oh, yeah. I love both of those movies. Like they're amazing. And just to see that she got her start with some really strong material, that it wasn't like 5 years of kind of small little like little bit parts and things. And, you know, maybe she got into like it's from the beginning. She's on stage and then in films, like she's off and running from the start.
Yeah. Palms was the one I did not see.
Palms. It's a great airplane movie.
Exactly. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
But yeah, she's really, I mean, I think she's still finding her voice in this a little bit. I did make a note, like, did you think this too, watching Played Against Sam? I was like, this feels kind of like preparation for what's to come in Annie Hall.
Yes.
Like we have the three leads who are all in Annie Hall and playing with that fourth wall breaking. And like, I was like, there were parts of this, I'm like, okay, this is done better 5 years later. And
almost accidentally, because I think, you know, we both went to the same film school. We probably read the same book on editing, how that was called Anhedonia, and it was a murder mystery that was twice as long, and that he came in and cut it into the movie that it is today.
Did he do reshoots for Annie Hall, or he took a 2.5 hour plus movie and said, I think the story is this, and he just cut the other stuff out?
Well, he kept on shooting more and more and more, is my understanding. But I haven't read that book in 20 years.
Is that screenplay available of the original?
Doubtful.
I would love
somewhere
to read, because I read that he used most of that material in Manhattan Murder Mystery in '93. Is that right?
That makes sense. Which is why Diane's around, even though she's no longer in his Woody Allen films.
Yeah, like he took the plot of that part of the movie but I'm like, when you watch Annie Hall, it's just so mind-blowing. Like, wait, there was like another hour plus that was about a murder mystery in this. Like, are there any moments? It's like when you watch Back to the Future and you try to see Eric Stoltz.
Right, you see the back of Eric Stoltz's head a couple times, and you see like him in the distance at one point, because they shot for a week or two. Yeah.
Oh no, Eric Stoltz I think they shot at least a third of it, like maybe more than that. It was a lot. It was a lot. Like,
I was listening to the Blank Check episode on Zemeckis, that whole miniseries.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. But I'm like, there's no sign in Annie Hall of that other storyline at all. There's no one-line reference, nothing.
But because of that, because they cut so much out, the thing that makes Annie Hall so special to people, and it's actually not in my like top 5 or even top 10 Woody Allen. I think it's a little off-putting at times and a little jumpy, but the jumpiness and like the cutting between things and like the flash forwards and the flights of fancy, these make it feel so modern, whereas the 2.5 hour murder mystery version with this romance in it would probably feel sluggish and normal. It's because it went through this weird, insane process that it feels so modern or even postmodern, and why it's so memorable. Because like, you know, it jumps around in time like crazy in a way American film wasn't really doing in 1977 for the most part. And now we have a million Woody Allen clones, for better or for worse. A lot of them, like, I love the filmmakers who sort of use his tone, his concepts, but are not Woody Allen films. Like
Noah
Baumbach, Together, the Patty Harrison film, which opens with the Woody Allen font, and then they talk about him within the movie. Wonderful film. And what's it called? Can You Ever Forgive Me? The Melissa McCarthy movie.
Oh yeah,
has a Woody Allen tone to it. Kind of his dramas. Yeah, all those. But yeah, Baumbach, who's a great and also complicated filmmaker.
Yeah, I've liked some of his work. Some of the other films I haven't really enjoyed, but a couple of them I've really been knocked out by. I think he's a good director. He's done some, like Squid and the Whales, I think, a great film. Which I was at LMU at the time. I'm sure I wrote a review for that. So a couple final things before we get to our final segments. Let's see. So Played Against Sam was well liked by the critics. Roger Ebert gave it 3 stars. He said, as comedies go, this is a very funny one. Gene Siskel gave it 3 stars. Vincent Canby in the New York Times called it a funny film. Charles Champlin in the Los Angeles Times wrote the film was in the tradition of the best bright comedies of the past. So critically, it did very well. It's like slight enough of a movie that I wouldn't have been surprised if the reviews had been mixed. I'm kind of surprised that like the top critics were saying positive things.
I think it, because it feels like such a normal plot. I think that feels very comfortable and nostalgic to people. And this is just as the 70s are really getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is where the film school generation is starting to reapply knowledge of the past into a new form of art, which is also being influenced by European cinema.
Yeah, exactly. And my last piece of trivia I thought was really interesting was that Quentin Tarantino said on his audio commentary track for True Romance that the Elvis Presley character played by Val Kilmer was based on the Bogart character in Played Against Sam. I did not know that.
I did not know that either, and I love True Romance. I'm that a-hole who's like, True Romance is the best thing Tarantino ever put his name on, in my opinion. I'm not sure if I believe that anymore, but I know a lot of people don't like it, but I really like Tony Scott, and I think changing the screenplay to go in order instead of a bunch of Pulp Fiction flashbacks was the right decision.
Oh, okay. So if Tarantino had directed it, it would have been vastly different, you think?
Right. Yeah. In his screenplay, it starts in it starts halfway through and then jumps back to how they meet. It's all the crap he was doing. But of course, Pulp Fiction is seminal. Reservoir Dogs is great. Jackie Brown is my favorite of his movies because it's actually emotional and not just cool. This is not saying he's not a successful filmmaker. He is. He's a very interesting person. He's a pop culture blender. But True Romance was influenced by a freaking Woody Allen film. That's so funny to me.
I mean, obviously he's a film. He loved films before he got famous and made all of his movies. He was working at the video store watching everything, so I'm sure he watched Played Against Sam at some point, and that, I mean, it is a creative use of something, to use not just an actor but like a specific character and that persona to serve your story. Had films really done that before 72? Like, was there a instance of another movie where they used a character from a different film to like talk to? I mean, there's like Harvey. There's the film with the bunny,
right? There is
but there. I feel like that was kind of an innovative idea for this play and this movie.
Yeah, it's not quite the same, but there's a Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz movie called, I think, Listen, Darling, where they're going through their marriage is kind of on the rocks, and she has a guardian angel played by James Mason, and she's like, "You look like James Mason." He's like, "Yes, because I'm in your brain, and you love the actor James Mason." And then she sees the James Mason movie. So that's in the mid 50s.
That's the mid 50s. Okay, so it happened.
It's not a good movie. Of the two major movies they made together, Long Trailer is much better.
Okay. Well, I love James Mason, so that would make sense. That somebody
and James Mason, who is one of the stars of The Last of Sheila, directed by Ross, written by Stephen Sondheim and Anthony Perkins.
What? The Last of Sheila? What year is this?
It's like 1975, I think. Okay. Let me bring that up.
I think, did you bring this up? I feel like this title has come up once before.
1973.
That blew my mind. 1973?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we'll get to it in a few months.
It is a murder mystery on a yacht. It is a parlor game gone wrong, and is based on the parlor games that Sondheim and Perkins would make their friends do.
Oh, I think there was a podcast where Alonso Duralde and the other hosts, they would like compare two films that had similarities. I think they did Clue. I think they did Clue with this other film.
Yeah, The Last of Sheila.
The Last of Sheila.
The Last of Sheila is very influential on Clue, and especially Knives Out.
And Knives Out. So and that Anthony Perkins, I didn't even know of as a screenwriter at all.
And he's really not.
Okay.
You should see it.
I'm so happy that's 73 because that means I get to watch it soon.
And it's on Turner Classic Movies constantly. It's not a good print. I'll say that.
Really? I watch TCM a lot. I've never seen it on TCM. Interesting.
Anytime we do like a whodunit week, it's there.
Okay.
Because it has Richard Benjamin and Diane Keaton and James Mason and all these people. And written by
Diane Keaton's in it?
No, Diane Cannon.
Oh, Diane Cannon. I was like,
close enough.
Wait, I missed that one when I did the year of Keaton. Oh my gosh, Diane Cannon. Diane Cannon. She's a lot of fun too. So let's see, before we get to our final two segments, anything else you wanted to say about Played Against Sam? Anything we didn't mention? Any other scenes we liked? I feel like we touched on everything. We touched on the end. I wrote about the ending. I'm like, I mean, I really enjoyed the last 10 minutes of the movie, but it also makes it feel kind of slight because there's not a realism to it. So it's kind of like you're just watching this fantasy sequence and then it's over. And you're like, okay. So it's you don't take a whole lot away from it, like on an emotional level. It feels kind of like it's not really happening because it's tied so closely in with Casablanca versus the ending of Annie Hall, which in a movie that has like these fantasy moments and moments of whimsy, it ends on a very realistic level, and so you take more away from Annie Hall, I think.
Yeah, and then of course, he bookmarks Annie Hall with 2 jokes, and they're both the lamest of jokes. And at the start of the movie, you're like, okay, this guy just knows his stuff. The second one is like, oh, this is like Alan Felix in Play It Again, Sam. This is sometimes all he has.
That's true.
And it's much sadder because he just broke up with the woman of his life.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I would give this movie kind of a soft 3 stars out of 4. It's not one of his better films of the 70s, but I feel like because it's that first collaboration between him and Diane Keaton, like if you've seen some of his work and you want to seek out some of his early stuff, I do think even though he didn't direct it, I think this is one you should probably watch at least once.
Absolutely.
Especially because of the Diane Keaton participation from her and her scenes with him.
And it is such a tight script. If you want to know how to just write a joke every 20 seconds, either see this or read a bunch of Neil Simon. As dated as they are so good at crafting that rhythm.
Yeah.
They're very worth studying for a writing purpose alone.
That's something I was doing a while back that I haven't thought about it lately. I would like to get back into reading more plays. I really enjoy reading plays. Yeah. That's a great idea.
And they're so easy to read. It takes 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, I found there was a book at the library a couple years back, Paddy Chayefsky. I think it was his TV plays, and I was reading through his work. Oh, you have it? I have it. Yeah,
I have everything that I have all of Chayefsky's stuff.
Yeah, but his stuff, it just reads so quickly and easily, and it just sucks you in every play he wrote. And so yeah, I'd like to get more into that.
It's so personable and relatable.
I wonder if they ever published this Play It Again, Sam, like in a book. Like, did they ever publish like Woody Allen's plays as like a paperback or something?
I have a few.
I know he wrote a few books.
Yeah, and I have those too, like essays
and stuff,
and short stories. I have the first 2 of those. I got them like 20 years ago at like a half price books.
I'm a big believer in that, plays and even screenplays. Maybe not every screenplay, but I do believe in that. Like we should have them in book form. I really like that, even if it's something that's meant to only be shown visually. I've always really liked not so much screenplays where it's like pages and pages of just like cut to this, cut to that. There's no dialogue is the most fun part to read in that stuff, but I still think there's something about having it on the page.
Absolutely. Screenplay, the thing is, it's not the 90s anymore. That's when screenplays were really a thing to be sold. Play It Again, Sam. You can buy it on Amazon from Samuel French for $9.79. Interesting.
Just the one play, not in a compilation.
Oh, I just wrote down Play It Again, Sam. But yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay, cool.
And there is a hardcover book that was published in 1977, but that seems out of. Oh no, I can get it for $8.
Is that? And it's just the play.
It's the play, and the cover is lovely because it's the seduction scene with Bogey hovering over his shoulder.
Oh, interesting.
Nice.
So that takes us to our final 2 segments, the Divine Double Feature. This is a very brief movie, Marcus, 85 minutes. What would you recommend if we watched one more after this, something more modern? What would you suggest?
So not more modern. I was going through this because this was tough, and we talked about this beforehand. Obviously, the closest reference for Woody Allen is Purple Rose of Cairo, his own favorite of his own films, which is about like how people find solace in movies, which is a lovely film. My wife, who does not like Woody Allen, we watched it last year because we are the Turner Classic Movies Wine Club, and that was suggested, and she's like, "I'm so angry how much I love that."
That's one of his best films, The Purple Rose of Cairo. It's beautiful.
Too obvious about like a woman who loves cinema and how it affects romance. It's The Shape of Water,
right? Which is a great idea. I don't know why I didn't think of that.
And remember the big musical sequence in that?
Yeah, the black wasn't it black and white?
Yeah, when she's doing "You'll Never Know," which is an Alice Faye song. They are doing a sequence from "Follow the Fleet," the Astaire and Rogers film. The song in that is "Let's Play the Music and Dance." Let's face the music and dance. And that same set and song, that is used in Pennies from Heaven, the Ross film, but done in the, we're trapped. And that's when the musical sequence, when the jail cells start coming down around them.
Oh, okay.
So that's a connection to that. This is still too old, but there's a 1980 horror film called Fade to Black. Have you seen this?
I've seen that.
Yes, great movie about a cinephile in LA.
He's an editor, right?
He works at a distribution center.
Okay.
And he murders people who get in his way, and he's dressed up as Jimmy Cagney, the Mummy, Dracula, Hopalong Cassidy, and that's a great film if you haven't seen it. It's also kind of a comedy.
Yeah. I think I saw that on TCM. I think it was on TCM on on a Saturday night or something.
Like TCM Underground.
That's and I'd heard of that title, and I was like, oh, let's check this out. Yeah,
and one of the great horror posters. The one I went with going for the last 20 years, it's a Jonathan Levine movie called The Whackness with Josh Peck and Ben Kingsley and Olivia Thirlby, where it's 1994. He's just graduated high school. He's trading marijuana with his shrink for for analysis, and he is obsessed with 80s and 90s hip hop, and it sort of powers his world. It's not like one-to-one thematic, but it is about a guy who uses art to sort of pep up his sort of boring Jewish life. It's a very Jewish character, Jonathan Levine, who's a very strong filmmaker. He made 50-50. He made The Long Shot. He made The Night Before. All the Boys Love Mandy Lane. Great. Yeah. Long Shot's great. Warm Bodies, a lovely little zombie romantic comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, The Whackness I saw at the 2008 Los Angeles Film Festival. 2 years in a row, I went to the whole festival, and cool. I saw it at that.
And that was a couple months after it won the top prize at Sundance.
Yep.
Good time. Yeah. So that is my modern quote unquote film, The Whackness from 2008.
That's very good. So yeah, I mean, there's better kind of like romantic comedies of the last few years, but the one I thought of when I was looking through some lists, I thought might be interesting just to see the evolution of like the romantic comedy having elements of like the meta aspects of like where we know that certain movies exist was Isn't It Romantic from 2019 with Rebel Wilson, where she kind of like her life becomes a romantic comedy after she stumbles and hits her head.
Oh, that's a good one. I should have thought about that. Yeah,
I saw that in a theater. I remember I finished work one day and I had to be somewhere, but I had like 2.5 hours to kill. And I thought, let's go see what's playing at the theater. And I really like Rebel Wilson. And I'm like, this will be a fun time. And I was not disappointed. What was that? I think February 2019 that came out. So 3 years ago. I can't remember much of it, but I remember laughing through a lot of it. It's a good time while you're watching.
It's the third Hemsworth brother, and he's really funny in it. And Betty Gilpin is the comic relief, and she's the great part of it, because other than the musical sequences and Betty Gilpin, it's a pretty forgettable film. It's from the director of the third Harold and Kumar movie, and like The Final Girls, which I think is a slightly overrated meta horror film, the Tom Middleditch one.
I don't think I've seen The Final Girls. I know of that one.
It's a bunch of like 20-somethings and Thomas Mill just get sucked into an 80s camp slasher film.
Interesting. So the same guy directed Isn't It Romantic and The Final Girls?
Yes. The problem with that movie, it's that it's a PG-13 horror when it should have been R.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's usually a problem when it's PG-13 for a horror film.
Yeah. And it's a comedy first, but it could have been an R-rated comedy.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be my choice. I thought that would be kind of an interesting, like more modern film to look at right after Play It Again, Sam.
And also it kind of disappeared. So that's nice.
And I try like at least every 5 episodes of this podcast, I try to come up with like, what's not the most obvious title? Like what's something like The Whackness that people don't really talk about anymore? Because that happens every year. There's like, usually have 3 or 4 films that I loved any given year that 5 years on, nobody talks about anymore. Like it's just like, it's gone.
Right. And you go to film festivals, so that happens even more. Things that, never get widely released.
That movie, that must be hard when you see films that you adore and they don't even get a proper release, and there's no way for people to really watch them. It's like, how do you talk about that film to people? Because at least like I know that people can go find Isn't It Romantic? It's available somewhere, they can watch it.
Yeah.
All right, that takes us to our final segment, Herbert Ross. So you said you've seen about half of his films.
Mm-hmm.
So what if you had to take 3 to a desert island? What are the 3 you take with you?
In third place, it is deeply underrated, and I talked about it before. It is Funny Lady, the sequel to the blockbuster Funny Girl. So Funny Girl, like I said, it gets Barbara her Tony. It's a mega hit as a film. She splits Best Actress with Katharine Hepburn for A Lion in Winter. Great year of film. Whereas the first one is about the first half of Fanny Brice's career. This is about the second half after she's become famous. And
it's James Caan, right?
James Caan as Billy Rose, her second husband. And in the first one, the songs are by Julie Stein, who did Gypsy. In this one, it's Kander and Ebb. So they're all kind of clever.
Okay.
If you're looking, because, they like to write things that sound like the period, but are actually deeper and more dark. Like you just covered Cabaret, which is, that in Chicago are the top things, and both are deeply satirical and dark films.
Yeah.
But this one has, Let's Hear It For Me and How Lucky Can You Get? It's two Barbara mainstays, two standards. Ben Vereen's in it. Although the studio made Herbert Ross, cut it down to 136 minutes. And so most of Ben Vereen's performance hit the cutting room floor.
Okay.
Too bad. And it was nominated for 5 Oscars, including Bob Mackie for costume. It's really fun. I have a friend who's obsessed with Funny Girl. And I'm like, you have to watch the sequel, which is just as good. And then she turned it off 30 minutes. And she's like, I'm bored.
She loves Funny Girl, but did not even watch the entirety of the sequel.
No.
I just know the sequel from the movie In and Out, where he talks about funny. She was under contract, and the Joan Cusack line that follows that was a classic. But I don't know how that. It's been a thing on the podcast. Like, I have seen almost nothing of Barbra Streisand's films of the 70s. Before I started this podcast in 2020, the only 70s film of hers I think I've seen is The Way We Were. I think it's the only one. So I'm just making my way through her work right now.
And that's because she has a different career, and basically after Beer Has Two Faces mostly stopped acting. So we didn't really grow up with her stuff. Her stuff predates us.
Yeah. I liked her in The Guilt Trip. I thought
she's really good.
I thought that was an underrated film and a great character, and you don't really see that kind of like mother-son road trip comedy ever. And I have a great relationship with my mom, and we saw it together, and that was like I like that movie just came and went, and I really liked her. I think that's the last film performance of hers. 2012
was that, and I didn't even see Meet the Little Fockers. I don't know if that's
Little Fockers was 2010, and then Guilt Trip was 2012, and I think that's the last thing she's done on film.
That's it. And her and Seth Rogen have great chemistry.
Yeah, it was a nice movie. Like, it wasn't gonna set, it wasn't like anything great, but I enjoyed it.
But to your point, like the In and Out line, Barbra Streisand did only make Funny Lady because she was under contract.
Oh, she did. Okay.
But then she read the script and like, oh, it's good. But she was like, you have to sue me if you want me in this fucking movie. Excuse me.
So 68, she makes Funny Girl. Like, for her to sign up for Funny Girl the movie, she had to sign a contract about a sequel.
I think she was signed up at the studio.
Oh, it was a studio.
Sort of like how Edward Norton, like how Edward Norton's in The Italian Job as the villain. He did not want to be there. He just had to fulfill a contract.
Yeah, that happens. I hear that. But I feel like if the movie is not expected to be like a franchise, I mean, that's different now with Marvel and stuff. But back in the day, like, I don't know if you're signing up for sequels to a movie that they don't expect to have follow-ups.
Right. So I don't know.
I always found that, but I'm intrigued to see it. I really enjoyed Funny Girl. That's the one I saw for the first time on its 50th anniversary before I started the podcast in 2018. Yeah. I watched it for the first time and loved it. And so I'm excited to see it. Funny Lady. Yeah,
Funny Girl is like a real story. Funny Lady is more of a trifle. It's let's hang out with Barbra Streisand for another 2 hours and just have her be awesome. She's basically playing herself, and she said she was playing herself when she was Dolly Madison too. That's what she does.
Oh, okay.
And I finally saw Yentl for the first time last year, and she's really great in it. It's a great movie, but it took her 15 years to make it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was so amazing. It's so amazing how prolific she is in the 70s in film, and then it just like slows way down.
Because she becomes a concert singer where she makes, buttloads of money, and she has her own private mall.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So what are your other two films?
Number 2 is The Goodbye Girl.
Yep, that's my number 2.
The strongest I would say the strongest of Neil Simon's direct to film screenplays. Okay. Maybe The Heartbreak Kid is slightly better, but he and Oe May butted heads over that. Both Richard Dreyfuss and Marsha Mason are very funny. They're wonderful in it. It's actually more mature for Neil Simon's work for the most part, because it's not just quippy, even though, and Richard Dreyfuss is, if you believe the gossip, is basically playing himself. He's a crotchety person, which is kind of why his career sort of tanked about 20 years ago. He's just a pain in the butt. He's crotchety. It's the first romantic comedy to make $100 million in the US.
Oh, okay.
According to Wikipedia.
Same year as Annie Hall. Goodbye Girl. But Goodbye Girl wins Best Actor. He beats Woody Allen for Best Actor, Richard Dreyfuss, but then Annie Hall gets Director Picture. And then Star Wars gets all the technical stuff. Diane Keaton gets Best Actress. So that, I think 77 was like the Oscar year of the romantic comedy.
Hell yeah. and Goodbye Girl is so funny. So in it, like he's a new actor in town, and he has to do Richard III, but the director's like, make Richard III like homosexual and effeminate, which is both a very funny runner in the movie and also, in retrospect, pretty cringy. But it is a commentary on how homosexuality is seen in performing arts in the 60s and 70s. So it's not making fun of him. And he's like, oh, thank God that this play is closing immediately because I'm embarrassed to do this not at all Richard III. Great film. And that's when Neil Simon was still with his wife, Marsha Mason, before they divorced. And she's a delight in it.
I didn't know they were married.
They divorced. And this is apocryphal. So in their divorce contract, she got a certain percentage of the proceeds for his next play. So he wrote the worst play he possibly could that would close immediately, which is called The Idiots, I believe it's called, which is a very bad play. Now, this might be a myth, so don't quote me on that, but that is the story of their divorce.
Oh, wow. So kind of like the producers, that storyline of like, let's create the worst play of all time. Like he did that for her.
Yeah. He did something that he knew would close immediately because it's a fantasy about like a Russian village full of idiots.
Oh, okay. And she had to be in it?
No, she got the proceeds.
Oh, she got the proceeds. So he didn't want her to make very much.
Right. Which, if it's true, is a BS move.
That's crazy.
And then Goodbye Girl gets adapted into a Broadway musical in 92 with Martin Short and Bernadette Peters.
Ooh, that would be cool.
And it was nominated for Best Musical. It lost to Kiss the Spider Woman with Cheetah Rivera.
Oh, okay. So one film turned to another one from the 85 movie. Interesting.
Which is most musicals right now is movies.
Yeah, the name recognition is the thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Like you can't really. Can you make anything now?
In the last 10 years, because Best Musical gets either 3 or 4 nominations, and in the last 10 years, usually 3 of those 4 spots are movie adaptations. One year it was all 4 of them. I'm like, what's happening?
That doesn't sit right with me. It's
really Broadway is different than other parts of musical theater. Broadway is built for the tourism industry.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Which is tough. So the things that make it to Broadway, if you're an original, you got there by sheer will and actually it being great.
Yeah. That's why I still really appreciate the Academy Awards, because, we could be at a point now where in Best Picture, we're getting just the big popular movies of the year, and we're still not there yet. Which
thank God. Thank God we expanded to more than 5, so we can have it. Because if it was just 5, it would be the same 5 Oscar bait boring films.
Exactly. All right. So what's your favorite? If you had to pick one favorite, Herbert Ross.
So I know I was saying he's sort of a vacuous stylist, but Pennies from Heaven is one of the great musicals, one of the only good musicals of the 80s, in my opinion. Like there are really influential musicals of the 80s, but this is something that really works. So his style of just letting the camera happen actually fits this Depression era story. So it's adapted from Dennis Potter's miniseries. And they moved from London to Chicago during the Depression. It's about a sheet music salesman played by Steve Martin, who's married to Jessica Harper, another wonderful 70s performer.
Yep.
In some of my favorite films, including Phantom of the Paradise, which I have a little.
Oh, I love that.
A little action figure of the Phantom right there of Winslow Leach. In college, my AIM username was Winslow Leach.
Oh, I came to that one really late. Phantom of the Paradise is really fun.
It's one of my parents' favorites. So
Great music.
Oh, incredible. And so he's married to Jessica Harper, and he has an affair with a school teacher, Bernadette Peters, but they're in the Depression and she becomes a prostitute. And it's the darkest American musical probably made in the last 40, 50 years. That's not based on Les Mis or some stuff. It is a tough watch. It is one of the few musicals that is really willing to tear into what musicals mean and what, how we look at art and how it influences our lives, because the idea is that it's a musical, but they are lip syncing over the original recordings.
Okay.
And that says something very sad about these characters. And then everything goes completely to hell. It is a heartrending movie. You've never seen anything like it, not even the miniseries it's based on. It is by far my favorite of his films.
Oh, very cool. That's a great segue, because that's my number 3. And that's a great movie. I feel like even Steve Martin fans, even musical fans, many people have not seen that one, right? Because it didn't perform very well at the box office.
Huge bomb. It lost so much money. And
it's weird in that. So Steve Martin's leading man debut in a movie was The Jerk with Bernadette Peters in 79, and then 2 years later they're together again in something that you couldn't get more different.
Right.
The Jerk,
which is really cool. And he was dating her at the time of The Jerk. I don't think they're dating at the time of Pennies from Heaven.
but like Steve Martin's a really great dramatic actor. I talked about one of my first videos on my new YouTube channel. I talk about his work as a dramatic actor. I feel like most people think of him as just this funny guy. And even on the new show the new show he did with Martin Short and Selena Gomez, Only Murders in the Building. It's funny, but there's a serious side to some of that story. I was just happy to see him in that territory again. Maybe that's what Diane Keaton needs to do, like a limited series on Hulu.
all of the best comic actors are incredible dramatic performers.
Oh yeah, Robin Williams.
Because I think the funniest people are also the saddest.
Yeah, exactly. And I just feel like it's such a unique part of his filmography is Pennies from Heaven, and it's really fantastic. Christopher Walken has a musical number in that. It's like on another level. And
Let's Misbehave.
Let's Misbehave. And I haven't seen it in a while, so I would like to check that. I watched it. I think I've only seen it once, and I just remember being dazzled by it. I really like it. It's
hard to watch. And also, you saw my junior thesis film. I use a song from Pennies from Heaven in that.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, the one with Amy.
With Amy.
Yes. Yeah, the last reel, my black and white man goes through a soundstage of his memories.
Yeah, no, I remember I worked on that film. I was like on
yes, that's right.
Was that the old man in like on the bed? Yeah.
Yep.
And then I think I met Amy on that movie, and then I used her in my gay film the next year, Lonesome Bride.
That was influenced by
Small World.
Yeah,
that's so cool. That's great. And then my number 2 is Goodbye Girl. Again, like Pennies from Heaven. I can't remember the last time I watched it, but I have vivid memories of moments from that movie, and I remember really loving it. And just a great Richard Dreyfuss performance, and like of its time, just the perfect movie of like for 77 and that time. There might be some cringy elements to it today. I'd have to watch it again.
It's also very accurate towards what theater was doing in the 70s, which I appreciate, which a lot of films didn't try to do at all.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say I also like Boys on the Side. My Blue Heaven is a lot of fun. A movie that came out in 1990. So when I was watching like HBO in like 91, 92, a lot of My Blue Heaven come up. And I'm a huge Little Shop of Horrors fan. And I feel like a lot of people don't know that Rick Moranis and Steve Martin are in another movie together, because it is kind of underrated, not especially today in 2022. I don't think a lot of people know My Blue Heaven. So I would say check that out. But yeah, my favorite, if I had to pick one, it's Steel Magnolias. And I would highly recommend you watch it. It's a very weepy kind of, dramedy movie, but with just the most insane ensemble cast. It's Julia Roberts, who got an Oscar nomination, great in the movie. It was kind of like her mini breakthrough right before Pretty Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sally Field is her mom, and it's got Dolly Parton, and it's got Olympia Dukakis, Shirley MacLaine, who else? Daryl Hannah, just all of these great actresses at the top of their game. It's a little bit kind of like goofy at times, but I just love that story, and it's very emotional. If you don't get a little bit teary-eyed by the end, I don't know. It's just a great yarn, well directed. It's just one of the most astonishing female ensemble casts of any movie I think ever made. It's just really great. Yeah. So check it out. Steel Magnolias from 1989. Really great film.
And it was his biggest hit.
It was his biggest. That would make sense. Yep.
Yeah. I almost was able, and I didn't see. So they revived it on Broadway in the last 10 years with an all-black cast. Like Felicia Rashad was in it, and I really wanted to see that, but the timing didn't work out.
Wasn't there? Didn't they put it on film? I want to say in the last 5 years there was like a film. It might have been for TV, like a film version of that movie with a black cast.
Yeah, it was a TV version.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, because that as it should.
2012.
2012. Okay. So
directed by Kenny Leon, who I think directed the stage version. It was on Lifetime. Yeah. Queen Latifah, Jill Scott, Alfred Woodard, Felicia Rashad.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I have to watch that.
Hell yeah.
So the story stays the same, but we have another amazing ensemble of actresses. I would love to see that. Very cool. All right, that takes us to the end here, Marcus, talking about Play It Again, Sam, and the terrific career, really, really astonishing career of Herbert Ross and all of his work. And we did it. We made it to the end. How are we doing?
We did it. Once again, I thought, we'll talk about this for 45 minutes. I don't have a lot to say about Play It Again, Sam. And here we are at 2 hours in.
It is a thing, and it's fine. It's a podcast. It's fine. The day that we talk about a movie for 42 minutes and then we wrap it up it'll be a strange conversation. That would have to be a film where there's literally like nothing to say.
Right. And why would we do that?
And it's like, why bother? Right. So A lot of fun. So yeah, so this will be dropping in early April. So tell us maybe if you want to talk about a little bit more about your film festival, anything else you'd like to promote, or where our listeners can find you online. Now's the time.
You can find me at marcusgorman.com.
Okay.
I talk about this in the Pink Flamingos episode. The most public thing I've done recently is the radio play Space Race 5000, which is sort of wacky races plus the Cannonball Run plus Death Race 2000. You can find that on Spotify and wherever you get your podcasts. It's produced by the Ugly Radio. It's called Space Race 5000. I am developing a few more plays right now. And the Seattle International Film Festival runs April 14th through 24th. Okay. It will be both in person and online. So with the exception of some films who don't want to be online and a few who are geo-blocked to the Pacific Northwest, you will be able to watch them in any of the contiguous 48 United States. Okay. And I program in New American Cinema, especially the competition, which are movies that do not have distribution. And we want to give them a boost and give them a $5,000 prize. And I also program for WTF, which is genre stuff. I can't talk about what we programmed, but it's a very good mix of horror and weird, like fringe theater elements.
Cool.
And insane dark comedies and wolf tales. And we get 6 spots to blow your minds. So April 14th through 24th, sif.net, SIFF.net.
Perfect. So yeah, by the time this drops, that'll be just coming up here. It's perfect timing. Fantastic. So yeah, thanks for being here, Marcus. Always a pleasure to have you on Film at 50. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And check out my new YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, where I'm talking about the history of the Academy Awards and films and actors, their careers that I love. Check that out at Brian Rowe Video. Until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.